Coming up on the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
She says, quote, saying that we should always do the difficult task first can be extreme. We don't have data, but my intuition is if people start with a difficult task and try to stick with it until they finish it, they could become demotivated without a sense of progress and super fatigued. Having a combination of easy and difficult is a more effective strategy. You get a sense of completion, but at the same time, mindful focus on difficult tasks as well. End quote. And in that article, Vaza suggests we break down difficult tasks into smaller, more manageable tasks that feel easier and move the progress bar along. Difficult tasks provide more opportunities for us to learn and develop our skills. But she again quotes Professor Kachaki as saying, quote, what's more important is the psychological sense of completion and that it matters. Ultimately, the goal should be to be aware and be more intentional and mindful of what you do, end quote.
Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis, a podcast for people navigating the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. I'm your host, Billy Lahr, an educator, personal trainer, meditation teacher, and overthinker who talks to experts who specialize in social and emotional learning, mindfulness, physical and emotional wellness, cultural awareness, finances, communication, relationships, dating, and parenting, all in an effort to help us better reflect, learn, and grow so we can live a more purpose-filled life. Take a deep breath, embrace the present, and journey with me through the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. I'm your host, Billy Lahr. Thank you for tuning in wherever you are. The purpose of the show is to provide a platform that gives people the space and permission to share their expertise and life experiences in order to help others navigate the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. But on the first Wednesday of every month, I record a solo episode to share my travel experiences with you and how those experiences are helping me navigate my own mindful midlife crisis, which is actually more of a midlife pivot than a crisis because if I'm being honest, I'm feeling pretty good about where I am in my life. But if you've been a fan of this show since day one, you know that that has not always been the case. So I'm happy to share my experiences with you in these solo episodes in the hopes that my trials, tribulations, and successes will inspire you to take intentional action to live a more purpose filled life. And remember, this free and useful information is helpful to people of all ages. Wisdom is not about one's age. Wisdom comes from our ability to reflect, learn, and grow from our own life experiences while also learning from the experiences of others, regardless of what stage of life we are in, because you just never know what life is going to throw at you. So there just might be a story or two from past episodes, whether those come from the solo episodes or the experiences and expertise my guests share with us, that help you feel better prepared for the challenges you might face in life or that you're facing right now, whether those challenges be your emotional, mental, and or physical health, your relationships with others including your partner and children, your career, your finances, whatever curveballs life is throwing your way right now. Just know that you are not alone in your experience, and the conversations I'm having here are with people who have been there before or have done the research to help you navigate these situations with more awareness, openness, curiosity, and compassion so you can live a more purpose filled life. And trust me, I take all of these conversations I'm having to heart as well, and I try to apply what I'm learning from each of these conversations to my own daily life, which is why I enjoy doing these solo episodes because I think of this show as a running dialogue between me and you, the listener, because my hope is that you can see and hear the growth I'm making in my own life so that it inspires you to seek out the connections between these shared experiences so that you too can take intentional and inspired action. So, if you're looking for some ways to help you better navigate whatever you've got going on in your life from someone who's been through it before, check out some of the other episodes at www.mindfulmidlifecrisis.com or wherever you get your podcasts. I am recording this week's episode in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and by the time you hear it, I will be in Krabi, Thailand. I also just booked a trip to Vietnam out of nowhere. So I'm very, very excited for that.
Not bragging, but some of you listen to this show because you like hearing about my travels. So if you're curious what I've all been doing since I got to Thailand, and if you're curious what I'm going to be doing when I get to Vietnam, give me a follow on Instagram at mindful underscore midlife underscore crisis. I've been in Thailand since the beginning of the new year. And speaking of the new year, let me ask you this. We're a month into 2023. Did you make a New Year's resolution? And if you did, how is that going for you so far? Are you sticking with what you set out to do way back on January 1st? Or have you abandoned all hope? I'm sure there are many of you out there who have ditched your New Year's resolution. And you know what? That's okay. You're definitely not alone. In fact, according to past studies cited in this N26 article that I'll be sure to link in the show notes, 80% of people abandon their New Year's resolution by the first week of February. And like I said, if you've abandoned your New Year's resolutions, it's really not that big a deal. It happens. Maybe you just don't know how to budget your time very well. It's okay to be where you are, and I'm sure you're great just the way you are. But I'm also of the opinion that we should always be looking for ways to reflect, learn, and grow as people whenever an opportunity to do so presents itself. Because if you're not choosing to grow, then you're choosing to decay. And if you're not intentionally taking action to make changes, you're going to be the same you when the next new year rolls around. And listen, don't get me started on this whole new year, new you BS, or this even more ridiculous counter movement that I'm seeing lately, which is new year, same you. I think both of these are equally ridiculous. The world doesn't need a new you. Okay. We don't need a new you. But I do believe that you can teach an old dog new tricks. So in today's episode, I'm going to teach you a method that I use from time to time to help me be more intentionally productive. And remember, life is an experiment. I'm actually having Jason Robinson on next week to talk about the experiment mindset. And if I'm being honest with you, a lot of what I'm sharing with you has undergone many trials and errors, and I'm still tweaking things. So feel free to take everything I'm sharing here with a grain of salt. You're also welcome to adapt it in a way that works for you because life is not a one size fits all existence. But with that being said, what I'm sharing with you today does have some research that supports it, whereas other elements of what I'm sharing have simply been conducted in my own life laboratory, right? So in episode 79, the last solo episode, I walked you through why I think morning routines are important, and I walked you through what a morning routine looked like for me when I was at my most productive. So now I want to show you how I prioritize what I need to complete each day following that morning routine. So, what I did is I created this thing I call a chips list. Now, what's a chips list, you ask? Well, I think to do lists just promote busy work, right? There's no sense of urgency or importance. It's just, hey, here's a list of things that you can do today. A chips list, though, first identifies what you absolutely need to complete today, not tomorrow, not later in the week, today. So that's what the C stands for, complete. This does not include daily habits, which we'll talk about at a later time. It means the 3 to 5 tasks that must be completed today. And when you work on these tasks, you will find that you're more focused and can get in a groove when you eliminate distractions. Put your phone away so you don't get disrupted by notifications. Admittedly, this is my biggest weakness. But I've found that when I leave my phone out of sight, it's out of mind, and I am far more focused and productive. You'll be tempted to check your phone after you complete a task. I find myself doing that far too often, but I would encourage you to instead take 3 mindful breaths before you transition into your next task. And who knows, maybe you've been hunched over your computer and your body has been screaming at you to sit up or stand up or stretch or just move in some way because you've been so hyper focused that you didn't even realize that your body was experiencing some pain. So, those 3 mindful breaths will be a good reset for you while you are completing these tasks. So, what I want to do here is I want to take you through this practice of 3 mindful breaths. Now, you can practice these 3 mindful breaths anywhere at any time, but I'm going to ask that if you're practicing this right now as you're listening to me and you're driving or you're doing something else that requires you to be focused on your safety, please keep them open. But if you're sitting or standing still, including riding on the bus or riding the subway, but again, not driving, not doing something that requires you to be fully focused on your safety or the safety of others, I'll invite you to close your eyes, or you can simply lower your gaze. And now just feel your natural breath as you inhale through the nose and exhale through the nose. Just let that feeling register for a bit. Notice where you feel your breath, whether it be in the belly, the chest, the shoulders, or the nose. And now take a little longer inhale through the nose, filling up your belly with air. And now slowly exhale through the nose, letting your belly soften. Notice what your shoulders are doing. And if you feel them moving up and down excessively, see if you can bring some relaxation to them and direct your next slow, long inhale into your belly. And on the exhale, letting your whole body soften, melting into the breath, leaving the body. Let's do one more long, slow inhale through the nose, filling your belly with warm air, and slowly exhale through the nose. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. And take some inventory of these new sensations and the world around you. So, how did that feel? What was that experience like? What new awareness about your body, breath, thoughts, or emotions do you have after just taking those 3 mindful breaths? Did you find it beneficial in some way? If you did, then I encourage you to visit www.mindfulmidlifecrisis.com and go to the contact page and sign up for the newsletter because I send out meditations like that every Sunday. Or you can visit the Mindful Midlife Crisis YouTube page and access them there as well. All of that is in the show notes. So let's do this. Now that you're feeling at ease, let's take a quick break so you can go and sign up for the newsletter and you can subscribe to the YouTube page. And when we come back, we'll talk more about what all goes into a chips list. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. If you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Also, giving the show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words helps others find and benefit from this podcast just like you are. Finally, please spread the wealth of free knowledge and advice in this episode by sharing it with the people in your life who may find this information and my mission to help others live a more purpose-filled life valuable. My hope is that these conversations resonate with others and inspire people to live their best lives. Thanks again. And now, back to the show. Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Today I'm talking about how we can prioritize our tasks through a chips list. We just covered the C, which means complete. You notice I didn't spend a lot of time with that because you know what you need to complete. My only suggestion would be, hey, just make sure you keep it between 3 to 5 tasks. Don't overload yourself. And in between each of those tasks, just take 3 mindful breaths, just like we did there. That probably took about a minute. In between each of those tasks, just go ahead and let that feeling of productivity hit you and allow yourself to feel the satisfaction of that accomplishment. That's your intangible reward right there. And quite honestly, that's most likely what will instill discipline and consistency within you so that you can continue taking inspired and intentional action. You'll actually get a dopamine rush from completing those tasks, but then also sitting with that feeling of accomplishment. Now, that's the intangible. What about the tangible incentive to completing those tasks? So that's where the H comes in. And as cheesy as this sounds, the H stands for hooray. I told you it was cheesy because here's the thing, you're going to want to identify something that you're going to do maybe later in the day that will bring you joy. You should want to experience joy, happiness, contentment, satisfaction in something outside of whatever the work you're doing, right? You want to continue having fun. For me, when I'm in Korea, it's often attending a soul share or a CIK meetup event or going out to dinner with a friend, right? So I usually add that to my H, to my hooray. And once I'm done with my C, then I can say, okay, now I can go ahead and do this thing here where I'm going to celebrate the accomplishments of my day. I'm going to celebrate the completion of these tasks. So that's how I use the H. And why do we do that? Well, I'm a firm believer in celebrating your completions in some way. And even my BetterHelp therapist seconded this. And actually, she really liked the way that I developed this chips list with intention throughout the day. So, just in case you needed some validation that is actually a legitimate productivity tool, there you go. A licensed therapist thought it was a good idea. My one recommendation, though, is this: avoid using alcohol and food as your hooray. I think alcohol is something that should be consumed sparingly. I've talked about this before. I don't think it's something that you should consume daily. I have an issue with all those people out there who are like, oh, I have a beer with dinner every single night, or the wine moms out there. We've talked about this in episode 5 when Brian on the Bass, my former co host and my good friend, shared his story with alcohol abuse. And we discussed it when we talked to gray area drinking expert Carrie Schweer in episode 61. So if you're wondering why I have an issue with this, check out those 2 episodes. And I also think that when we view certain foods as treats, it has the potential to warp our relationship with food. So listen, your celebration can be as simple as transitioning from doing mode into being mode. We don't have to constantly be in doing mode. Maybe your celebration is sitting outside and letting the sun and the cool breeze hit your skin while you just simply sit in awareness and gratitude. And we'll talk about the power and the benefits of gratitude at another time, but those are things to kind of consider too. All right. So maybe make a list of the hoorays that you could do on a regular basis, and then just keep a list of the hoorays that you maybe need to schedule to do, right? Because then you have something to look forward to. Then you can create new stories, you can create new experiences, you can catch up with people in different ways. So that hooray list is really important because it helps maintain the fun in your life. All right, so once we've completed your C list and you've identified how you're going to celebrate your job well done in the hooray list, this is a choice. You can choose to move on to your IPS list. And IPS stands for in progress or start. Maybe you've got a little extra time. Maybe you've got a little extra energy after crossing off your items in the complete list. Maybe you're still feeling motivated and productive after those last 3 mindful breaths that you took after completing whatever the last item was on your complete list. Then by all means, feel free to work ahead. But notice I said work ahead, not get caught up. If you need to get caught up on something, put that task in the completed list. But if you want to work ahead or finish something before its deadline, then go for it. But if you choose not to work on it and you instead choose to simply bask in the glory of the work you've completed throughout the day, that's cool too. Just know that whatever is in your IPS list is eventually going to be in your complete list. Okay. So now that you know how to create a chips list to be more productive, the $1 million question is this: should I start with the easy tasks first or the difficult tasks first? Well, so this is where research and personal preference get in the way of each other. So I think context and nuance are important to discuss when it comes to prioritizing tasks. So I used to think starting off the day with small tasks and using those to build momentum was the best approach to productivity. But I'll link an article in the show notes that says, according to research, we should knock out the hard stuff first because the little things begin to feel like busy work and are really just methods of procrastination. So research says start with the hard stuff first. I'm going to tell you though, personally, that's not how I operate. Let's take this episode for example, right? Like, I knew I had to write the script for this episode before I left Korea, and I knew my last week in Korea was going to be extremely busy. So I set a deadline for Tuesday, December 27th to get this episode recorded before I left Korea on Friday, December 30th, because I thought I was going to put it out the first week in January. Turns out I moved it to February instead. But regardless, I just wanted to have that script. That means I started writing it on Christmas Eve because I was feeling super motivated to get this script started. But because I kept making numerous revisions to it because I'm a perfectionist, I also worked on it on Christmas Day. Here's the thing: I didn't really feel like working on it that day. I did not have the same drive. I did not have the same motivation on Christmas Day that I did on Christmas Eve. I didn't sleep well the night before. I woke up around 4:15 in the morning and I wasn't able to fall back asleep until like 6ish, and then I woke up around 9ish and I just didn't feel super productive that day. But I also knew I had a strict self imposed deadline because I wasn't going to have time to write this script the first few weeks I was in Thailand. So I needed to get this episode written, but I just didn't feel like working on it. So what did I do? How did I get this thing done? Well, in order to build momentum, what I did was I replied to 3 emails that I've been putting off for about a week or so. And sending those emails felt good. It got my brain going, it got my creativity going. It released some dopamine, which allows us to feel pleasure, satisfaction, and motivation. Doing that helped me focus on finishing the script for this episode, which I can tell you has undergone several revisions due to the research I keep doing around habits and goal setting and task tackling. And I'm actually making slight changes to it right now as we speak, as I'm recording. But the good news is that it's pretty much completed because even though I wasn't motivated that day to write it, I found a way to move forward and get unstuck by starting my day off with a few small wins. So, again, that leads us back to this question: should we tackle the hard stuff first or the easy stuff first? Well, according to this article by Stephanie Vaza, which I highly recommend reading, so again, I'll link it in the show notes where I put all the goodies, it's actually best to do a combination of both. Vaza references some research conducted by Miriam Kochaki. I hope I'm pronouncing everybody's name correctly here. And if I'm not, and you're listening to this episode, please email me at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com and let me know if I'm mispronouncing your name because I feel embarrassed if I am. Anyway, Miriam Kochaki, who is an associate professor of management and organizations at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, she says that, quote, saying that we should always do the difficult task first can be extreme. We don't have data, but my intuition is if people start with a difficult task and try to stick with it until they finish it, they could become demotivated without a sense of progress and super fatigued. Having a combination of easy and difficult is a more effective strategy. You get a sense of completion, but at the same time, mindful focus on difficult tasks as well. End quote. And in that article, Vaza suggests we break down difficult tasks into smaller, more manageable tasks that feel easier and move the progress bar along. The article also says that difficult tasks provide more opportunities for us to learn and develop our skills. But she again quotes Professor Kachaki as saying, quote, what's more important is the psychological sense of completion and that it matters. Ultimately, the goal should be to be aware and be more intentional and mindful of what you do, end quote. And this is actually the approach I often took with my students. When I was a dean, I would frequently meet with my students who were failing their classes. Usually, it was due to missing assignments, projects, or assessments. That was generally the main culprit. So I would print out their missing assignments for each class and we would go through them together. And I would say things like, okay, you have 3 missing assignments in this class, 6 in this class, 4 in this class, and 1 missing project in this class that will bump you up to a passing grade once you complete it and turn it in. So if you're a difficult task person, you're probably thinking, well, duh, do the missing project first. Well, not so fast. You also have to be mindful of how much you're trying to complete. That's something else I would point out to students. So I would usually start with the class with the one missing project because I wanted to know how much of that project was finished. So I would ask them, how much of this is completed? And based on that response, we'd create a new deadline that we'd approve with the teacher. If the project was 75% completed, I'd say, okay, let's make this a priority. How long do you think it will take you to finish this project? And when do you think you can turn it in? And they'd say, I can probably finish it tonight and turn it in tomorrow. Perfect. Take that off the board, right? But then I'd get the kid who'd say, I haven't started it yet, or I've completed about 20% of this project. Well, then that's not going to be a priority yet because that project is most likely going to take a bunch of focused time to complete, which means time before or after school working on it with the teacher or with one of our academic mentors in our after school academic support program. That's going to take a lot of time, and staying after school to work on missing assignments is not a high priority for students who don't enjoy school. But if we can generate some momentum by completing some of the other missing assignments in those classes, especially if we identify the big bang baby assignments, the ones that are the most bang for your buck, right? Then it's possible we see some light at the end of the tunnel and we can motivate the student to do what's necessary to complete the missing project. But I would have students with 10 to 15 missing assignments spread throughout 4 classes. So we would identify those big bang for your buck assignments, and I would ask them, okay, how much of this assignment do you have completed? And sometimes it was finished and all they had to do was submit it. So I'd watch them do that in my office and we'd move on to whatever assignment was the next priority on the list. And I'd ask them the same question. How much of this assignment do you have completed? Maybe they'd say 70%. So I'd ask them, okay, how long will it take you to finish this assignment and when can you submit it? And they'd always say tomorrow. So then we go through the rest of the assignments like that. And by the third time they'd say tomorrow, I'd stop them and say, okay, let's wait a minute here. You already said you're going to complete these other assignments that are missing by tomorrow. And you have your current homework that you also need to complete. Do you think it's realistic to add this assignment to your complete list for tomorrow? And obviously, they were telling me what I wanted to hear. They thought I wanted to hear them say they complete all of that missing work in one cram session. But let's be real here. They weren't going to complete all that work in one night. So I would say to them, how about we turn that one in 2 days from now? That way you can focus on this first batch of missing assignments that you're almost completed with tonight. You can do this other assignment tomorrow night, and you can do this third missing assignment the next night. Then over the weekend, I'd like you to tackle this project that you haven't started yet and make progress on it so you can turn that in soon. When do you think you can turn in that big project? And then we would set a new realistic deadline and we would ask for teacher's approval of that new plan and work with the teacher and the parent and the student on that as well. Did this work all the time? No. It did not. It did not work all the time. In fact, some students outright hated going through this process. It was much easier for them to just ignore the problem and let those missing assignments pile up than make a plan to resolve it. Now, admittedly, there were a few really important questions I forgot to ask during these sessions, like what responsibilities do you have when you get home from school? Are these responsibilities getting in the way of you completing these missing assignments in the first place? What is your nightly homework routine? If you don't have one, let's discuss what that will look like moving forward so you don't find yourself in this situation again. More often than not, the issue is almost always time management. Yes, there were often far more complicated issues getting in the way, but at the end of the day, the majority of students fell behind in their classes due to poor time management at home. Why? Because it was unstructured time. And teenagers, I've talked about it. All right. Even me, I struggle with unstructured time. Essentially, though, I was helping students structure their time. I was cutting off the number of decisions they had to make about what to work on and when. They'd had the luxury of making that choice taken away from them due to their own irresponsibility and lack of time management. And that's not harsh, right? That's not a harsh thing to say. That's what's called a natural consequence. With great power comes great responsibility, right? And when you can't handle that responsibility, someone usually needs to step in and guide you. So, just as I did for my students, I am here to offer my services to you in case anything I have shared today sounds intriguing, but you're just not sure where to start, or you're just not convinced you'll stick with it unless someone holds you accountable. And if there is one thing that I've learned during my time solo traveling, it's this: I should have budgeted for either therapy or a life coach. I was navigating so many life transitions that I'd never had to think about before, and I was dragging a lot of unresolved emotional baggage and residue with me. So when I tried to make a plan, I was only using the tools I had in my toolbox. Luckily for me, I was also having a lot of great conversations with amazing guests who shared their experiences and expertise, and I was able to implement a lot of what they shared into my own experiences so that I could navigate life a little better. But when I got back to Korea in October, I finally invested in working with a therapist again through BetterHelp. Now, again, BetterHelp is not a sponsor of this show yet, but I am more than okay with giving them a little bit of free advertising because I am a huge advocate of therapy. Because if you go back and listen to episode 3, you'll hear about how therapy and mindfulness not only changed my life, but most likely saved it as well. So, if you're looking for some affordable mental health services, you can get a free week of BetterHelp by going to the show notes and clicking on the referral link. Just to be transparent, if you sign up, I also get a free week. But if you sign up, then you'll get your own referral link that you can share. And if one of your friends or family members or colleagues signs up using your referral link, then you get a free week. And it becomes this beautiful pay it forward cycle of emotional support and healing that allows us to experience and live with more joy in our lives, which, in my opinion, we could all use a little more of these days. So check out the show notes for that referral link. I wish I would have started using this service a year ago when I first started traveling and transitioning, because when you're doing something like this alone, it can feel overwhelming. So it's nice to have a licensed therapist to help you process everything so you can follow through on those life changing daily habits that lead to achieving your goals in life. And I take my conversations with my therapist and the guests of this show to heart so that I can put in the work to get just a little better in the long term. Do I make progress every single day? No, of course not. Our growth looks more like the stock market, right? We might go through a really rough patch that puts our growth into a bear market, and we may not reap the benefits for a while. But if we play the long game, you'll see the stock market always bounces back. And like I've said before, if you're not investing in your personal growth, then you're investing in your personal decay. If you haven't been investing in your personal growth, it's time to make a move. So if you're looking for a way to help you be more mindful and productive, let me be your accountability partner. It's my way of saying thank you for investing in me by listening to me share this advice with you today. And I want to show my appreciation to you. There's no cost, there's no obligation. As I said before, I just want to see you succeed. So if you start falling behind, I'll be there to help you reflect, learn, and grow. And remember this: mindfulness is about sitting in awareness with open curiosity, compassion, and non judgment. So if you suddenly become aware that you've fallen behind, congratulations, you are practicing mindfulness. My job will be to help you process that new awareness with curiosity, compassion, and non judgment so that you can let go of whatever is holding you back from living a more purpose filled life. So, if what I share with you today sounds intriguing and you'd like a little more guidance on how to use a chips list, then go ahead and click on that Calendly link in this episode's show notes, and let's make a plan to reflect, learn, and grow in 2023. If this episode inspired you to invest in yourself in a new way, please do me a favor and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple listener, please consider leaving us a 5-star review with a few kind words. And if you're a Spotify listener, give us a follow and click the 5 stars under the show art. There are a lot of resources in this week's show notes, so be sure you have a look at those as well. If you'd like to share your thoughts on this week's episode, you can find all of my contact information in the show notes as well. Feel free to email me your takeaways from this conversation at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com. You can also follow me and DM me on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. You can find me on LinkedIn at Billy Lahr, that's Lahr, or you can send a message through the contact page at www.mindfulmidlifecrisis.com. While you're there, feel free to sign up for the newsletter so you can get access to the free meditations I send out every Sunday. Finally, remember that sharing is caring, and I would greatly appreciate it if you would share this episode with the people in your life who may benefit from having someone help them be more mindful and productive so they can live a more purpose-filled life in 2023. So with that, this is Billy. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved. Take care, friends. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Mindful Midlife Crisis podcast. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with your family and friends. We will do our best to put out new content every Wednesday to get you over the midweek hump. If you want episodes to be downloaded automatically to your phone each week, all you need to do is hit the checkmark, subscribe, like, or follow button, depending on what podcast format you're using. While you're at it, feel free to leave our show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words so more people like you can easily find our show. If you're really enjoying the show and you want to help us out, feel free to make a donation to www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. That's www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. You can also access the link in our show notes. We use the money from these donations to pay whatever expenses we incur from producing the show, but ultimately, we record this show for you. So if you keep listening, we'll keep recording and releasing new episodes each week regardless. If you'd like to contact us, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like us to discuss on future episodes, feel free to email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. Thanks again for listening. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved.